Chris is a foreign news editor at The Age in Melbourne, where he wrote some of the first stories in the media about Russian cyber interference during the US election. He joined Fairfax Media in 2008 as a business and economics reporter, and previously he worked at CNN Money in New York and at Fortune magazine. Will you please welcome Chris?
I've been asked to talk about the rise of misinformation and so-called fake news and what effect that can have on accountability, trust, and ultimately justice in our society. Before I begin, let me say something that probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Everything you're about to hear is my own opinion and doesn't reflect the opinions or views of Fairfax Media. Now, although I'm going to talk about fake news, I actually consider that term a bit of a misnomer. Fake news is, to me at least, a euphemism popular in democracies to describe propaganda, misinformation, or even coordinated influence campaigns using the news. I think we often use this term because it's hard for us to cope with the reality that what we rely on as news can be so easily manipulated. And it can be manipulated by forces fundamentally opposed to an open democracy and the rule of law. When you think about it, truly fake news, alien landings, hoaxes, rumors, as individual events in isolation, can be examined and disproved. And this is all important in the context of the court. But of course, we don't consume most of our news in that setting. Increasingly, we don't even consume news in a thorough way. The deluge of information is far too great. So is the speed of transmission across TV, the internet, and social media. More threatening than obviously untrue facts is what I call half-fake news. That is, news that is willfully distorted or tainted to dupe readers into believing and acting on a certain falsehood. This is information that in many cases appeals to people already inclined to believe it, urging them to accept false or damaging conclusions, particularly in politics. Social media giant Facebook recently released a report admitting that the platform was used for coordinated information operations. Facebook defines information operations as actions taken by organized actors to distort domestic or foreign political sentiment, most frequently to achieve a strategic and/or geopolitical outcome. Once upon a time, this sort of thing would have happened only in war, to deceive an enemy on the battlefield. Today, the internet allows these information operations to be aimed at civilian populations during peacetime. The more sophisticated ones have a deep psychological element to them. That's what's happening now. Even as Australia is not necessarily the intended target of such campaigns, it is the recipient of them, both because we're an English-speaking country and the internet is a globalized platform available to all. The viral nature of news means that what works as an argument in the UK or US can easily be used here. Similarly, news, events, arguments, memes, and culture created in Australia is recycled elsewhere for the same purpose. Maybe you've heard the case of the Labour MP Anne Ali, attacked on social media for allegedly refusing to lay a wreath at an Anzac Day dawn service in Western Australia. The claim was later debunked, but not before being shared rapidly with people inclined to believe it. It fed into a series of weaponized narratives about Muslims in Western society. But the problem of fake news gets murkier still on social media. Researchers are finding that the willful spread of conspiracy theory can have the effect of undermining trust in media and fact by the public. That is, in all media and all facts by the public. During the recent US presidential campaign, accounts on social media, aided by automation, bots, actively promoted the notion that Hillary Clinton was dying, was dead, or was replaced by a body double. Factual nonsense. In a courtroom, none of it would hold up. But in the endless drumbeat on social media, this torrent of conspiracy theory about Clinton's health helped loosen part of the public's grip on political reality. It takes the public to a place which says it's impossible to really understand what's going on. When Clinton finally did stumble with pneumonia on the campaign trail, the internet went wild, and the traditional media weighed in, giving a conspiracy theory undue credibility. If even the mainstream media was reporting it, didn't that make the issue a little true? Or so the thinking goes. In this climate, errors in reporting by traditional media can be conflated with outright lies being peddled elsewhere to suggest to the public that all facts are opinions, all reporting is equally suspect. There is already a sense of political disengagement driven by shifts in economics and technology. Politicians who label real news as fake for a short-term gain aren't helping the matter. But add propaganda, misinformation, and conspiracy into the mix, and the disillusionment will only get worse. If people can increasingly pick and choose their facts, the consensus for a functioning democracy corrodes. If we can't agree on what the common issues are that we all face, we can't really have a sensible political debate. The kind of information war strategy we're seeing from Russia in the global sphere urges a crude, inward-looking nativism in which people of different backgrounds are told their interests fundamentally differ. Hot emotions are championed at the expense of sober facts. This propaganda arouses suspicion of our fellow citizens in our society. In a courtroom, the big risk isn't that the notion of truth will necessarily break down. The bigger risk is that the sense of community will. The community relied on to produce fair juries for fair trials is the same community that seeks justice and fairness in their political choices. If we come to see all politics in our society as a cynical exercise in power, eventually the legal system will be seen the same way too. One of the features making modern propaganda effective in the 21st century is the fact that a society does not know how much it has consumed and accepted until a crisis is upon it. That means perhaps the biggest risk for a just Australian society is how far along we've already traveled in the path of accepting false and damaging narratives. Building up awareness to this risk now is crucial. Perhaps to fight the worst effects of misinformation and propaganda is to increase the focus of how and why a successful democratic society works. Because for an open democracy like Australia, we really are the sum of the integrity of our institutions. For that reason, there's much good in discussing these matters now, getting them out on the table while people's ears are still open. Thank you.